John, what led you to create the ballet, the Glass Menagerie?
Well, the Glass Menagerie, the play by Tennessee Williams, is something that's followed me for a very, very long time. I saw it first when I was 17 in Milwaukee. It was at the University Playhouse before I went to the university. The next year I did actually go to that university. And it was directed by someone who became the most important mentor in my life, Father John Walsh. And the main role of Laura was played by a woman named Joan Schwartz, who became a kind of adopted sister of mine all my life, a really, really very dear friend. So the play followed me, and I always imagined that it would be such a beautiful piece to create, but how difficult, intimate, not easy to cast. And I think a part of my motivation for actually doing it at this time was the work with Alina Kojukaru. Because Alina, I saw many, many years ago, not that many, but a few years ago, when she danced as a very young woman, Giselle, or part of Giselle, for a gala in Hamburg. And I remember speaking to this very shy, super sensitive young woman and saying, you should work with a choreographer. Because I noticed in her interpretation there was something so unique and so unconventional and so deeply honest and direct that I felt she, of course, when I said you should work with a choreographer, I meant me. I felt she should definitely work with me. And nothing happened for a long time. And then Alina called me years later when we were reviving Midsummer Night's Dream in Copenhagen and asked if I would consider her to be a guest for that performance. And of course, I spoke with the director and we both agreed that it would be a wonderful idea. And so our work together started. Then most important was that I created Lilium for Alina. And since that time, the idea of a Glass Menagerie became alive in my brain, in my mind, in my soul, I should say. So finally, it's like nature where you feel something is ripe, something is ready to happen, and there is no kind of logical reason for it. It just is, it seems like it's the right time to do it. And so that is why I decided to do it. Actually, at the end of last season, then there didn't seem enough time for such a delicate and difficult, unusual piece. And so I felt it would be interesting to let young choreographers do an evening and that I would take a little more time to research the work.
John, what were the initial first steps you chose to take when you knew you'd be creating this ballet?
Well, logically, the first step was to be sure that we could get the rights to use this material by Tennessee Williams, and so there was a request put to his representatives in Germany, and was a quite lovely answer that if the choreographer John Neumeier would be interested, it certainly would be good for this work. So after we knew we had the rights, the next important thing was to try to find music. And I had seen the film of The Hours with music by Philip Glass. And I found that music very evocative and very good. And because it fit the film, which I loved. And then I've always wanted to use music by Charles Ives, and I thought the combination of these two American composers would be great. And so that was the line I was going on, trying to find music. And by finding pieces of music, I had to establish a kind of libretto to know how it was going to be done. And so I studied the play, but that is an understatement in a sense, because the play made me research deeper and deeper into the life of Tennessee Williams, into the complete work of Tennessee Williams. Because we know that the play is based on so much about his own life and is inspired by his relationship to his sister, who was mentally ill. But the fact that there are so many small and large relationships within his life and within his own work, when one goes into it, I became fixated by this research. I mean, there are, I don't know, 25, 30 books that I have studied in order to understand the spirit, the soul of Tennessee Williams. Anyway, so we had two pieces of music, and I began trying to put them together. And then suddenly I thought, this is not going to work. I don't want a music that is so, this story, which is rather simple, I don't want to have it broken up into so many pieces of music that it becomes kind of a patchwork of music. So I decided and told our conductor, Simon Hewitt, that I was going another direction. I wanted to find a large symphonic work of an American composer so that the kind of breadth of the choreography would have a very clear musical form in which the episodes had to fit. And I went through a lot of music, unsuccessfully, because the play is so special. It's the memory quality, the quality of imagined episodes, the secretive quality of some of the text, what exactly is meant, where exactly is Tom going when he said he's going to the movies, what is the fascination of Laura with these pieces of glass. All these things are so sensitive that most of the music I heard was simply too heavy and too concrete, too so completely symphonic. So I went back to my old idea and decided I would start to put pieces together and just see what that would do for me. And actually, it was, for me, quite successful. I found that the way of combining the works that Ives and Philip Glass truly complemented each other. And I found wonderful pieces that describe the sense of memory, at the same time the sense of America, because the play is so basically American. But then for the main scene, I did not find music. And in my search for this great symphonic work, I listened to the music of Ned Rorem, a composer who is still alive, an American composer, whose music I used for a piece for American Ballet Theatre. And I found a most beautiful quintet, which to me had exactly the right emotional atmosphere, the right aesthetic weight for the important scene of the gentleman caller arriving. So the next important thing, obviously, was putting this music together.
During the first few weeks of the creation, how were you progressing, and what was the feeling you felt between you and your dancers?
Yeah, I think there are certain creations that start in a sort of normal way. You realize that a premiere is coming up and you have this work you have to do. So you realize dancer A, B, or C is free and she or he is going to be in it. So you start to work on it and you realize that you can put these sort of pieces somehow together sometime. But there are other creations, like when I did the St. Matthew Passion, I started with all the dancers at one moment, and it was a very important moment when I said we entered the room and we listened to the music and so on. And it was similar with the Glass Menagerie, because I knew I wanted to have Aline Kojokaru. I told her she wanted very much to do another creation, but she's a very popular, famous dancer at the moment. So she had a lot of engagements. And that was one of the reasons I postponed the ballet, because she said, well, I can give you 2 weeks here, then I will have to leave, and then I'll come back for 1 week, and then I go 3 weeks to wherever. And I thought, I can't do that with this work, because it's about a family. It's about the feeling of being together in this family, of knowing this family, of loving this family, of reacting to your brother, to your sister, to your mother, and I just said, Alina, that's not going to work. And I was actually quite hard with her. We almost had a disagreement, because she said, I said, we're going to start on, 25th of August. And then she said, I can come on the 1st of September. And I said, Alina, no. You have to be there, because this is not a work where I can do a pas de deux and then I'll do a solo and then you can go and then there's this and then there's that. This piece has to grow organically with the dancers who are working on it. The ballet is set around a table, just as in any family. in any human relationships, the table is such an important central prop in our life. I mean, it's our center. It's where we sit. It's where we nourish ourselves, not only on food but on our relationships to each other. And you've got to be there at that table when I start. So I think she understood that. She wasn't there at the first 3 days, I think, but she changed everything. And she was in Hamburg rehearsing every day for more than 3 months. And this was an amazing time. Things developed in such a special way with the people who were in my Nijinsky studio, where we got more and more props every day and had doors and walls put up and tables and chairs and beds, and we had everything in that room. We were living in that room, and we were living in a sense as a family. And the certain decisions were made, certain cast changes were made because of the way things were working. For example, from the beginning, I always felt that I would divide the role of Tom, who in the play actually plays 2 roles, because he plays more or less the kind of moderator. He speaks to the audience, and then he goes into the play. And there are very clear stage directions that says when he is in the play, he is without his coat. When he is as the narrator, he is wearing a jacket and he has a cap or whatever. I always thought that would be 2 people, because the idea of it being a memory play, of it being about something which happened years ago that I cannot quite forget, that I would divide the role to have an older and a younger. And I had always thought that Lloyd Riggins was going to be Tom, but then, was going to be the older Tom. But then I started to work with Félix Paquet, who was a new dancer in the company. And he's a very tall man. And he seemed so right. And particularly the relationship with Alina, I could believe in the rehearsals that they were brother and sister, the way they looked at each other. There was a look of such sincere but non-erotic love that I couldn't imagine anyone else. And then the choreography developed so that this Tom, young Tom, had to be lifted and put on chairs. And I knew that it wouldn't work with Lloyd, that it then had to be Edwin Ravatsov, who also had been part of the group. You know, we had, as always in a ballet, we don't just only have the first cast, we have the casts that I'm considering. We had Hélène Baucher, who was one of the possibilities for Amanda, the mother role. And she was working on this and we all worked on the first solo, the first entrance of Amanda. And then one day when Alina was not there, I just asked her to sit at the table and be Laura. And seeing her, it was a haunting image. She became the other character. And so it was clear that she could be and should be Laura. So the things changed this way, but they changed all in, you know, we know all the stories about Jerome Robbins and how he plays with people and throws people out and takes people in and you know, to get sort of the cast he wants to have. It wasn't at all like that. It was a situation where we all were working together And I felt every day I wanted to share also the research that I'd been doing, my going so deeply into the life of Tennessee Williams and how many things that he said even much later in his life had to do with this play, with this ballet. So I very often read things to the company that I discovered, and it was a most amazing atmosphere in the room of trying to understand everything. But I think it's because the ballet, the play, is about a family, and the family has problems. But I think we all have families, and most of our families have problems in one way or another. But there is something overriding those problems in the terms of how we are together. So I think that everyone who is in the room could, in their own way, bringing their own past to the work, become a part of this new family that was doing a ballet about a family.
I was just wondering if you could answer another question, which is the understanding when it comes to seeing how a role progresses and how in some cases a change, a very difficult change, has to be made, like in the case for the role of Amanda.
Yeah, I can try, because it's no secret, or nothing negative about Anna, because obviously Anna Lauderer is a dancer that I love. I love her giving of herself to every role, the dead seriousness of her approach to her work. But I think that Amanda is the most difficult role for a ballet to cast. In the play, the role of Amanda swims between comedy and tragedy and somehow the most moving aspects of motherhood. And in how to do that in a ballet without either being simply comedic or being sentimental. I felt from the beginning that it needed a completely different physical approach. It needed a weight in the feeling of the choreography that would be an extreme contrast to both the sensitivity of Laura, as well as the frustrated adventurous quality of Tom. It had to have something that had the down-to-earth desperation, determination, as a form of ambition for her children, as well as love, intensive love for her children, as well as a frustration about the development of her own destiny within the piece. And first I thought that Anna Lauderer would be the right one because she has done some unusual roles. For example, Isadora Duncan in Duse. I never found anyone that somehow could duplicate the choreography. She's the only person who has ever danced that role. And she has done funny roles, even in Jerome Robbins' The Concert. She was excellent. But I had Patricia Fritze, who was also working at the same time. And there was in Patricia an attack and a dynamic that always caught my eye when she would be in the room. And of course, it's always difficult to tell a dancer, well, you know, you've been working on this role, but I would like to now try another dancer. It's something that it's one of the most unpleasant things a choreographer, for me as a choreographer, that I've ever had to do. But at the same time, I feel that my responsibility is to realizing the work, first of all, as best it can be. Then once that work is established, it can be reinterpreted in other ways by other dancers. So after a certain time, I felt I had to go ahead with Patricia Fritze. And it's interesting that was, I think, the right decision. At the same time, there are still moments in the piece where I miss Anna. But it was a question of trying to balance what was the right idea. I'm sure that Anna Lauder will do the role of Amanda, and I'm sure it will be a very good and interesting interpretation.
Thank you. John, as the choreography was evolving, my understanding is that you had a great deal of many other responsibilities. You are, in this case, the set, lighting, and costume designer. How do you prepare for something like that? And what's your process for such an immense work?
Well, I think usually when I'm choreographing a ballet, even before I choreograph a ballet, I don't only think in terms of movement, steps, music, whatever. I see the movement, I see the dance, I see the figures in a world, in a different world. And this world is determined by many things. It's determined by the research that you do, sometimes not just this story happened in St. Louis. So what did St. Louis look like in the beginning of the 40s? But one idea, one sentence, one word that inspires you. And so I have to collect all of that and try to let all of these pieces come together like a kind of mosaic. But of course, you're not working alone. You have to work with departments who have to build these things. That means that there have to be certain times that things have to be done. And I had wonderful partners working on this. I mean, I could just, as an important aspect that one doesn't think about, the prop department. Jürgen, our ballet prop man, who is so, Jürgen Tessmann, who is so devoted to his work, is amazing. And so I involved him really early. The first thing I said to him is, I need to have a table. I need a table and chairs. And I remember from my family, of course, my childhood was later than the time of the play, but somehow there was, I didn't want it also to be particularly exactly in that time, but rather a time longer ago, a time in America, and we had a kitchen table and chairs which were chrome. And that was like the big thing to happen. I remember we had a very nice wooden table and chairs, which we threw away to get this terrible chrome table and these chairs with plastic, gray sort of marble-ish plastic covers on them, which we just thought was great. So I said, you know, you've got to find a chrome kitchen table. And he did. And I said, and we need typewriters. We need probably 9 typewriters. Well, suddenly there were 9 or 10, I think, original typewriters in his room. And then, but the most incredible thing was I said, we need a record player from the time. And if you see photographs of the original production, you see a sort of standing on legs Victrola, which maybe was the first thought I had. And then I knew that the way the story would go is similar to a film, that one scene would blend into each other. So I didn't want to have things that would be too heavy to move. So I said, try to find a portable Victrola, they were called in those days. And he found something which was probably from the, I would say, early 40s. And he said, I bought a few records, you know, these kind of vinyl records that were used then. The amazing thing was that one of these records was a song called I Love You. And this song, I Love You, is one of the songs that the main character, Laura, in the short story that Tennessee Williams wrote before he wrote the play, the short story called Portrait of a Girl in Glass, which is mentioned in the story as one of Laura's favorite pieces of music. And out of the, I suppose, millions of records that are in the world, in Hamburg, Jürgen Tessmann bought the record of I Love You. So there seemed to be a kind of touch of Tennessee, I guess, helping us to realize this, and to realize it in a very deep way, not in a superficial way, just of, you know, following the play, but actually trying to immerse ourselves in the play and its meaning and its essence, its relationships.
So, do you feel like the ballet is truly finished, John? Or is there a part of you that perhaps feels otherwise?
I can't really answer the question. I don't know if the ballet is finished. The performances that we did after the premiere, because when you work on something as intensely as we did on Glass Menagerie, you are so completely involved in it until the premiere. And then each performance, there may be a small change that you make that occurs to you that didn't occur to you before. But there has not been a major change in it. At the same time, I never think anything is finished, because that's the big difference between the pictures that are on the wall, which are all finished and we can't really take them down, and Jean Cocteau is not around, so we can't say we'd like to fix that one a little. We can with the Glass Menagerie. I think there's something that's always was a difficult question for me in Glass Menagerie. I think that aside from the fact of the nostalgic quality, the memory quality of it, I think there is also a humane and political undercurrent of criticism of the society of America at the time Tennessee Williams wrote the play that doesn't very often come across in the productions that I've seen. We hear about this in Tom's commenting about the state of the world as the situation of the play was going on, that in Berchtesgaden, there was already the horrors that were going to come over all of us during the Second World War. And there are a couple of comments about that. And I think that that was the plane on which Tennessee Williams was writing the play. And I don't think I've touched that in the play. But of course, it is a difficult quality to get, because our world has today completely different problems, although some may be the same. I thought for a moment, because, not for a moment, for a very, very long time, that I would end the ballet on a very aggressive, with a very aggressive moment, because the famous lines at the end of the play, which now in the present tense, Tom speaks to his sister Laura in the past tense about the candles which the gentleman caller left, and he says to her, blow out your candles, Laura, the world today is lit by lightning. And he definitely does not mean the lightning of a summer storm. He is speaking about the lightning of the possible destruction through all of the battles and difficulties, and even the final destruction in Nagasaki and Hiroshima with the atomic bomb. And so I thought that we would, with a very short, very aggressive piece by Charles Ives, have this apocalyptic vision of the end of the world, in a sense, behind Laura. But I think it was 2 days before the premiere that I finally cut it, because I think that in order to use such an element, I would have had to suggest this before. I would have had to, because otherwise I think it would be such a shock for the audience that everything that had gone before, those situations, characters, feelings that I'd been able to evoke during the evening would have been destroyed without giving us a credible, logical reason. And we would have been perhaps fascinated or said, wow, how modern, how kind of self-destructive John Neumeier was to end his very nostalgic, sensitive, lyrical piece so aggressively that. But thinking it over, I would have had to rethink the entire piece in order to make that ending actually logical, in order to justify the use of that aggressive film image that was there. So, maybe one day I will have a greater distance to the work and say, I think I was right. I think at this point and that point within the piece, I could already give suggestion to the fact that these people are existing on an earth which is about to explode. I think that this particular level in the play, which I've neglected in a sense in the ballet, this underlying, this kind of subtext of the aggression which was in the world, which was actually about to explode during the Second World War, we hear mostly in the monologues, in the asides, the way that Tom speaks to the audience. He, in one of the longer ones, he speaks about the Paradise Dance Hall, which was next door, and that on summer evenings when it was warm, the doors would be opening, and you could hear the music, and that there would be lovers who snuck out and would be kissing in the shadows, and that this was kind of a compensation for their more or less boring lives, as he felt his was. But he says then that changes are about to happen, because at the moment we're sort of suspended in this fog which is over Berchtesgaden, and that in Spain there was Guernica, and that actually in St. Louis there were kind of these dance halls and people dancing and liquor and bars and movies and things like that. And he even says that while one of the famous songs of the time was called "The World is Waiting for the Sunrise," and he says while the dancers were listening to this "World is Waiting for the Sunrise," what they were really waiting for were the bombardments.